Dear friends, let's begin with chapter 7. But before beginning, please subscribe and like the channel and like the video. It is very important. I really need your support. So let's begin with chapter 7. The Mufti who tried to close our school. Just in front of the school, on Kushal Street, where I was born, was the house of a tall, handsome mullah and his family. His name was Gullah Mullah, and he called himself a Mufti, which means he is an Islamic scholar and authority on Islamic law. Though my father complains that anyone with a turban can call himself a Maulana or Mufti. The school was doing well, and my father was building an impressive reception area with an arched entrance in the boys' high school. For the first time, my mother could buy nice clothes and even send out for food as she had dreamed of doing back in the village. But all this time, the Mufti was watching. He watched the girls going in and out of her school every day and became angry, particularly as some of the girls were teenagers. That Maulana has a bad eye on us, said my father one day. He was right. Shortly afterward, the Mufti went to the woman who owned the school premises and said, Ziauddin is running a haram school in your building and bringing shame on the mohalla. These girls should be in Parda. He told her, Take this building back from him and I will rent it for my madrasa. If you do this, you will get paid now and also receive a reward in the next world. She refused, and her son came to my father in a secret. This Maulana is starting a campaign against you, he warned. We won't give him the building, but be careful. My father was angry. Just as we say, Neem Hakim Khatri Jan. Half a doctor is a danger to one's life. So Neem Mullah Khatri Iman. A mullah who is not fully learned is a danger to faith, he said. I am proud that our country was created as the world's first Muslim homeland. But we still don't agree on what this means. The Quran teaches us sabr, but often it feels that we have forgotten the word and think Islam means women sitting at home in parda or wearing burqas while men do jihad. We have many strands of Islam in Pakistan. Our founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted the rights of Muslims in India to be recognized, but the majority of people in India were Hindu. It was as if there was a feud between two brothers and they agreed to live in different houses. So British India was divided in August 1947 and an independent Muslim state was born. It could hardly have been a bloodier beginning. Millions of Muslims crossed from India and the Hindus traveled in the other direction. Almost 2 million of them were killed trying to cross the new border. Many were slaughtered on trains which arrived at Lahore and Delhi full of bloodied corpses. My own grandfather narrowly escaped death in the riots when his train was attacked by the Hindus on his way home from Delhi, where he had been studying. Now we are a country of 180 million and more than 96% are Muslim. We also have around 2 million Christians and more than 2 million Ahmadis who say they are Muslims, though our government say they are not. Sadly, those minority communities are often attacked. Muhammad Ali Jinnah had lived in London as a young man and trained as a barrister. He wanted a land of tolerance. Our people often quote the famous speech he made a few days before independence. You are free to go to your temples, you are free to go to your mosque or to any other place of worship in this state. You may belong to any religion, caste, or creed. That has nothing to do with the business of the state. My father says the problem is that Jinnah negotiated a piece of real estate for us but didn't have the chance to turn it into a welfare state. He died of tuberculosis just a year after the creation of Pakistan, and we haven't stopped fighting since. We have had 3 wars against India and what seems like endless killing inside our own country. We Muslims are split between Sunnis and Shias. We share the same fundamental beliefs and the same Holy Quran, but we disagree over who was the right person to lead our religion when the Prophet, P.B.U.H., died in the 7th century. The man chosen to be the leader or caliph was Hazrat Abu Bakr, a close friend and advisor of the Prophet, and the man he chose to lead the prayers as he lay on his deathbed, Sunni, comes from the Arabic for one who follows the traditions of the Prophet. But a smaller group people believed that leadership should have stayed within the family of the Prophet and the Hazrat Ali, his son in law and cousin, should have taken over. They became known as Shias, shortened from Shia Ali, the part of Ali. Every year, Shias commemorate the killing of the grandson of the Prophet Hussein ibn Ali at the Battle of Karbala in the year 680 with a memorial day called Muharram. They whip themselves into a bloody frenzy with metal chains or razor blades on strings until the streets run red. One of my father's friends is a Shia and he cries whenever he talks about Hussein's death at Karbala. He gets so emotional you would think the events had happened just the night before, not more than 1300 years ago. Our own founder Jinnah was a Shia and Benazir Bhutto's mother was also a Shia from Iran. Most Pakistanis are Sunnis like us, more than 80%, but within that we are again many groups. By far, the biggest group is Berlvis, who were named after a 19th century madrasa in Bareilly, which lies in the Indian state of UP. Then we have Deobandi, named after another famous 19th century madrasa in UP, this time in the village of Deoband. They are very conservative and most of our madrasas are Deobandi. We also have the Ahl-e-Hadith, who are Salafist. This group is more Arab influenced and even more conservative than the others. They are what the West call fundamentalist. They don't accept our saints and shrines. Many Pakistanis are also mystical people and gather at Sufi shrines to dance and worship. Each of these trends has many different subgroups. The Mufti on Khushal Street was a member of the Tablighi Jamaat, a Deobandi group that holds a huge rally every year at its headquarters in Raiwind near Lahore, attended by millions of people. Last dictator, General Zia, used to go there, and in the 80s, under his regime, the Tablighis became very powerful. Many of the imams appointed to preach in army barracks were Tablighis, and army officers would often take leave and go on preaching tours for the group. One night after the Mufti had failed to persuade our landlady to cancel our lease, he gathered some of the influential people and elders of our mohalla into a delegation and turned up at our door. There were 7 people, some other senior Tablighis, a mosque keeper, a former jihadi, and a shopkeeper, and they filled our small house. My father seemed worried and shooed us into the other room, but the house was small, so we could hear every word. I am representing the ulema and Tablighian and Taliban, Muhalla Gulamullah said, referring to not just one but 2 organizations of Muslim scholars to give himself gravitas. I am representing good Muslims and we all think our girls' school is haram and as a blasphemy. You could close it. Girls should not be going to school, he continued. A girl is so sacred, she should be in parda and so private that there is no lady's name in the Quran, as God doesn't want her to be named. My father could listen no more. Maryam is mentioned everywhere in the Quran. Was she not a woman, and a good woman at that? No, said the Mufti. She is only there to prove that Isa was the son of Maryam, not the son of God. That may be, replied my father. But I am pointing out that Quran names Maryam. The Mufti started to object, but my father had enough. Turning to the group, he said, when this gentleman passes me on the street, I look to him and greet him with Assalamu alaikum, but he just bows his head down. The Mufti looked down, embarrassed, because greeting someone properly is important in Islam. You run the haram school? He said, that's why I don't want to greet you. Then one of the other men spoke. I had heard you were an infidel. He said to my father, but there are Qurans in your room? Of course there are, replied my father, astonished that his faith would be questioned. I am a Muslim. Let's get back to the question of the school, said the Mufti, who could see the discussion was not going his way. There are men in the reception area of the school and they see the girls enter and this is very bad. I have a solution, said my father. The school has another gate. The girls will enter through that. The Mufti clearly wasn't happy as he wanted the school closed altogether. But the elders were happy with this compromise and they left. My father suspected this would not be the end of the matter. What we knew they didn't know was that the Mufti's own niece had attended the school in secret. So, a few days later, my father called the Mufti's elder brother, the girl's father. I'm very tired of your brother, he said. What kind of Mufti is he? He's driving us crazy. Can you help to get him off our backs? I'm afraid I can't help you, Ziauddin, he replied. I have trouble in my home too. He lives with us and has told his wife that she must observe Parda from us and that our wives must observe Parda from him, all in this small space. Our wives are like sisters to him and is his like a sister to us. But this madman has made our house a hell. I am sorry, but I can't help you. My father was right to think this man was not going to give up. Muftis had become more powerful figures since Zia's rule and campaign of Islamization. In some ways, General Musharraf was very different from General Zia. Though he usually dressed in uniform, he occasionally wore western suits, and he called himself Chief Executive instead of Chief Martial Law Advisor. He also kept dogs, which we Muslims regard as unclean. Instead of Zia's Islamization, he began what he called enlightened modernization. He opened up our media, allowing new private TV channels and female news readers as well, showing dance on television. The celebration of Western holidays such as Valentine's Day and New Year's Eve was allowed. He even sanctioned an annual pop concert on the eve of Independence Day, which was broadcast to the nation. He did something which our democratic rulers hadn't even. Benazir had abolished that law that stated that for a woman to prove she was raped, she had to produce 4 male witnesses. He appointed the first woman governor of the state bank and the first woman airline pilot and coast guards. He even announced we would have female guards at Jinnah's tomb in Karachi. However, in our Pashtun homeland of the northwest frontier province, things were very different. In 2002, Musharraf held elections for controlled democracy. They were strange elections as the main party leaders, Nawaz Sharif and Benazir, were in exile. In our province, these elections brought what we called a mullah government to power. The Mutahida Majlis-e-Amal Alliance was a group of 5 religious parties, including the Jamaat Ulema-e-Islam, which ran the madrasas where the Taliban were trained. People jokingly referred to the MMA as the Mullah Military Alliance and said they got elected because they had Musharraf's support. But some people supported them because the very religious Pashtuns were angry at the American invasion of Afghanistan and the removal of the Taliban from power there. Our area had always been more conservative than most of the rest of Pakistan. During the Afghan Jihad, many madrasas had been built, most of them funded by Saudi money, and many young men had passed through them as it was a free education. That was the start of what my father calls the urbanization of Pakistan. Then 9/11 had made this militancy more mainstream. Sometimes when I walked along the main road, I saw chalked messages on the sides of the buildings. Contact us for jihad training, they would say, listing a phone number to call. In those days, jihadi groups were free to do whatever they wanted. You could see them openly collecting contributions and recruiting men. There was even a headmaster from Shangla who would boast that his greatest success was to send 10 boys in grade 9 for jihad training in Kashmir. The MMA government banned CD and DVD shops and wanted to create a morality police like the Afghan Taliban had set up. The idea was they would be able to stop a woman accompanied by a man and require her to prove that the man was her relative. Thankfully, a Supreme Court stopped this. Then MMA activists launched attacks on cinemas and tore down billboards with pictures of women or blacked them with paint. They even snatched female mannequins from clothing shops. They harassed men wearing Western style shirts and trousers instead of the traditional salwar kameez and insisted women cover their heads. It was as though they wanted to remove all traces of womankind from public life. My father's high school opened in 2003. That first year they had boys and girls together. But by 2004, the climate had changed, so it was unthinkable to have girls and boys in the same class. That changing climate made Ghulamullah bold. One of the school clerks told my father that the Mufti kept coming into school and demanding to know why some of the girls are still using the main entrance. He said, that one day when a male member of staff took a female teacher out to the main road to get a rickshaw, the Maulana asked, "Why did this man escort her to the road? Is he her brother?" "No," replied the clerk. "He is a colleague." "That is wrong," said the Maulana. My father told the clerk to call him next time he saw the Maulana. When the call came, my father and the Islamic studies teacher went out to confront him. "Maulana, you have driven me to the wall," my father said. "Who are you?" "You are crazy. You need to go to a doctor. You think I enter the school and take my clothes off? When you see a boy and a girl, you see a scandal. They are school children. I think you should go and see Dr. Haider Ali." Dr. Haider Ali was a well-known psychiatrist in our area, so to say, "Shall we take you to Haider Ali?" meant, "Are you mad?" The Mufti went quiet. He took off his turban and put it in my father's lap. For us, a turban is a public symbol of chivalry and Pashtunness, and for a man to lose his turban is considered a great humiliation. But then he started up again. "I never said those things to your clerk. He's lied." My father had enough. "You have no business here," he shouted. "Go away." The Mufti had failed to close a school, but his interference was an indication of how our country was changing. My father was worried. He and his fellow activists were holding endless meetings. They were no longer just stopping people cutting down trees, but also about education and democracy. In 2004, after resisting pressure from Washington for more than 2.5 years, General Musharraf sent the army into federal administered tribal areas, FATA, 7 agencies that lie along the border with Afghanistan, where the government had little control. The Americans claimed that Al Qaeda militants who had fled from Afghanistan during the US bombing were using the areas as a safe haven, taking advantage of a Pashtun hospitality. From there, they were running training camps and launching raids across the border on NATO troops. For us in Swat, this was very close to home. One of the agencies, Bajaur, is next to Swat. The people who lived in Fata are all from Pashtun tribes like us, Yousafzai, and live on both sides of the border with Afghanistan. The tribal agencies were created in British times as a buffer zone between Afghanistan and what was then India, and they are still run in the same way, administered by tribal chiefs or elders known as Maliks. Unfortunately, the Maliks make little difference. In truth, the tribal areas are not governed at all. They are forgotten place of harsh rocky valleys where people scrap by on smuggling. They have a very few hospitals and schools, particularly for girls, and political parties were not allowed there until recently. Hardly any women from these areas can read. The people are renowned for their fierceness and independence, as you can see if you read any of the old British accounts. Our army had never gone into the Fatah. Instead, they had maintained indirect control in the same way the British had, relying on the Pashtun recruited frontier corps rather than regular soldiers. Sending in the regular army was a tough decision. Not only did our army and ISI have long links with some of the militants, but it also meant our troops would be fighting their own Pashtun brothers. The first tribal area that the army entered was South Waziristan in March 2004. Predictably, the local people saw it was an attack on their way of life. All the men there carry weapons, and hundreds of soldiers were killed when the locals revolted. The army was in shock. Some men refused to fight, not wishing to battle their own people. They retreated just 12 days after and reached what they called a negotiated peace settlement with local militant leaders like Sheikh Mohammed. This involved the army bribing them to halt all attacks and keep out foreign fighters. The militants simply used the cash to buy more weapons and resumed their activities. A few months later came the first attack on Pakistan by a US drone. On 17 June 2004, an unnamed predator dropped a Hellfire missile on Sheikh Mohammed in South Waziristan, apparently while he was giving an interview. Whatever you thought about Sheikh Mohammed, we were not at war with the Americans and were shocked that they would launch attacks from the sky on our soil. Across the tribal areas, people were angry and many joined militant groups or formed Lashkars, local militants. Then there were more attacks. The Americans said that bin Laden's deputy Ayman al-Zawahiri was hiding in Bajaur and had taken a wife there. In January 2006, drone supposedly targeting him landed on a village called Damodala, destroying 3 houses and killing 18 people. The Americans said he had been tripped off and escaped. That same year, on 30th October, another US predator hit a madrasa on a hill near the main tower of Khar, killing 82 people, many of them young boys. The Americans said it was the Al Qaeda training camp which had featured in the group's videos and that the hill was riddled with tunnels and gun emplacements. Within a few hours of the attack, an influential local cleric called Fakir Muhammad, who had run the madrasa, announced that the death would be avenged by suicide bombings against Pakistani soldiers. My father and his friends were worried and called together local elders and leaders for a peace conference. It was a bitterly cold night in January, but 150 people gathered. It's coming here, my father warned. The fire is reaching the valley. Let's put out the flames of militancy before they reach here. But no one would listen. Some people even laughed, including a political leader sitting in the front row. Mr. Khan, my father said to him, you know what happened to the people of Afghanistan? They are now refugees and they are living with us. The same is happening with Bajaur. The same will happen to us, mark my words, and we will have no shelter, no place to migrate to. But the expression on the man's face was mocking. Look at this man, he seemed to say. I'm a Khan. Who dare kick me out of this area? My father came home frustrated. I have a school, but I am neither a Khan nor a political leader. I have no platform, he said. I am only one small man. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for next chapter.